Happy Veterans Day to any of you out there that have currently or previously served in the United States military. What's up, friends? I'm Christopher Chaos, U.S. Army veteran, and it's Veterans Day. At least if you watched this the first day that it went up. And I figured, you know what? Maybe we'll do a little Veterans Day video. How about that? So some of you have been subscribed to me way back when I had like 300 subscribers or less. And some of you have joined in this crazy journey that has recently just come about, where I have started to quickly climb in subscribers and viewership. And regardless if you were from the early days of subscribers or recently, I thank you very, very much. It is so amazing. But I figured there are probably a lot of you who have no idea who the heck I am and what my background is. You may just know me as this guy who's been posting some Army related videos recently. So that's what I'm gonna do in this video. I'm gonna give you a little bit of background on my military history in the United States Army. So I joined the US Army back in 1999. The whole reason I joined was I was in high school and I wanted to be an auto mechanic. Actually, I had the goal of going to the Army for 4 years, and then after those 4 years I would hopefully go to a college to get some more education in auto mechanics, and then the ultimate dream was I wanted to be a NASCAR mechanic, working in the garage, working on the engines and stuff. I'm actually thankful that I did not become a mechanic, because I don't think I would have the patience for it. Plus, mechanics in the Army work really hard. I know a couple of them. I've seen a lot of mechanics when I was in the Army, and they had a lot of long nights and a lot of hard work ahead of them. So I did not end up joining as an auto mechanic. I ended up getting into transportation as an 88 Mike, which is a truck driver. I wasn't super happy about that position. It was kind of one of the things where I was like, I'll just take it, get some 4 years of experience, and then go to college. So I went to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was August of 1999, and I was actually in one of the very first classes that kind of started doing other skills, other jobs, other MOSs, other than just infantry at Fort Benning. I had this other crazy story on my channel, maybe I'll link it in the description, talking about how our drill sergeants weren't too happy about that, and instead of getting hardcore names like Mad Dogs and Outlaws and all that stuff, we were the Goldfish for my platoon. But it was very interesting. We were part of that, very first cycle, very first class that wasn't just all infantrymen. And I think even now, I think they actually have females now at Fort Benning. From there, I had to go to AIT, which my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I spent, I believe it was 5 weeks for my AIT for my particular job. And then from there, I got to go home and spend basically a month back home before I was going to report to my first duty station. My first duty station was Fort Riley, Kansas. I was assigned to the 113th Armor. So when I showed up to Fort Riley, this was in the year of 2000, and I spent a couple years there in Fort Riley. I was stationed in Fort Riley during 9/11. Our unit was actually scheduled to go to the National Training Center in California. I think this was going to be my second time going to the National Training Center, and all this stuff started going down. So I remember me and my roommate, we went back to our barracks room after physical fitness in the morning, and we were listening to the radio, and they were talking about the plane hitting one of the towers, and I think we caught it kind of in the middle of it, because I remember we were kind of talking about it and thinking it was just some small plane, maybe an inexperienced pilot or something, and he just ran into the tower. We didn't know that it was a big commercial airline that ran into this tower. And at this time, people didn't even know that it was a terrorist attack yet. I remember after that, we were getting ready to go to our first formation for 9 o'clock formation, and we were going downstairs, and there was some TVs on downstairs in the main area of the barracks, and they were talking about the second plane hitting the tower. So then that's when we started realizing, wait, this isn't just some coincidence, and then we actually saw that these were large planes, not just some small little passenger planes. And we went to formation, and they kind of started talking about it, and we were gonna get more information later, and we just kind of went to the motor pool and did our job. While in the motor pool, we started getting words about, the Pentagon and another plane crashing in a field and all that kind of stuff, and we thought stuff was really going down. So we were being told by like our commanders and first sergeant and everything to be ready. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to go on and what kind of orders we were going to come up on or any of that stuff. So just be ready. We already had some people already in California kind of getting stuff set up for the National Training Center. I was supposed to leave the very next day to fly out, but planes were still grounded from the whole event. It turned out we weren't going to be doing anything crazy like immediately going to Iraq or whatever. So we were going to continue on with doing our training at the National Training Center, and I ended up leaving. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days late from when I was supposed to leave because of the whole situation with the planes. And the media saw all of these Fort Riley soldiers get on planes and leaving and everything like that, and they were reporting that, you know, Fort Riley soldiers are, you know, deploying to Iraq to take on the war or whatever, and you know, our units, you know, had to quickly respond and be like, no, we're just going to the National Training Center. So it was about mid-2002 that I ended up going on orders for Korea. I showed up in Korea, and they called off some different names at the very beginning when we kind of showed up there, and we went to the back of the room, and I didn't know what that was for. Several of us were back there. We kind of started putting some stuff together, noticed that we were all fairly tall, and we thought we were gonna be stuck doing like color guard or something. But it turned out they wanted us for the Joint Security Area, which is on the DMZ. They like to have Americans that are tall, so it looks to the North Koreans like all Americans are 6 foot and above. So I was stationed on the DMZ at Camp Boniface and working at the Joint Security Area. I got to see a lot of cool sights, got to visit a lot of cool stuff in Korea, and I had a lot of fun. We had a lot of restrictions while being in Korea, but you know, I still got to meet like a lot of celebrities, got to see a lot of sights and everything, and it was fun, it was a good time. Because the Iraq War was starting up around the time that I was in Korea, people were getting involuntarily extended for 6 months, and you had the option to just do the extra 6 months on top of the year that you were supposed to do, or you could volunteer to make it another full year and get a bonus and a choice of duty station. So I took the extra year, took the bonus, and got to choose where to go from there. From there, in 2004, I went to Fort Carson, Colorado. I chose Fort Carson as actually kind of my third choice. I really wanted Fort Irwin, California, but there wasn't any slots available for me. And I wanted California because I'm from California originally. The second choice was Fort Huachuca in Arizona, because I figured, you know, if I couldn't get California, maybe I'd get something closer, but there wasn't slots available for me in Fort Huachuca either. So Fort Carson was my next choice because I had talked to a lot of soldiers that I was stationed with in Korea. They loved Fort Carson, plus my niece was stationed at the Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, so I was close to her, so I figured, you know, I have a little bit of family there to be able to hang out with and stuff, so I chose Fort Carson in Colorado. I showed up at Fort Carson and I was assigned to the 3rd ACR. Once I showed up there, I found out that, you know, we were very shortly going to be deploying to Iraq. They actually had just come back from Iraq and already knew that they were going to be turning around in about a year to go back to Iraq. So I had a little bit less than a year stateside before I was going to be heading off to Iraq, and I deployed with them in 2005. So 2005 was my very first deployment, and it was to Iraq. We actually ended up first going to Baghdad, but that turned out to be not where we were going to stay, so we ended up pushing north to a smaller area in the northern part of Iraq called Tal Afar. Now this was a 1-year deployment, and most of the time we were there, we were doing a lot of humanitarian aid missions, dropping off food, supplies and stuff to local Iraqis. We also did a lot of missions where we were transporting prisoners, and I even had a short little phase where I was working on one of the detention facilities on the Tal Afar base. So we came back in 2006, and 3rd ACR was going to Texas, and I wanted to stay in Colorado, so I had to re-enlist to stay in Colorado. This was actually my, I think, 3rd time re-enlisting. I originally did not plan on staying in the Army as long as I did. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I planned to stay in 4 years, get out. Those 4 years turned into just a little over 10. And that's really because I was in different situations where it just wasn't a good idea to get out of the Army at the time, because I was gonna put myself in a bad situation where I didn't have anything lined up to really have a good transition out of the Army. So it was always just best just to stay in for a little bit longer, get stuff together, and then try to get out, and then that didn't happen until a little bit later, which I'll get to. So when 3rd ACR went to Texas, I moved over to 29 Cav, and then 29 Cav became 410 Cav. While in 410 Cav, we ended up deploying to Iraq. So this was my 2nd deployment, and this one was going to be a 15-month deployment. So in 2007, we took off and we went to Baghdad, Iraq, and this time, this is where we were staying. We were staying on the airport, the BIOP as it's called, the Baghdad International Airport. And that's actually one of the really nicer bases back then, FOBs or whatever, in Iraq when the US Army, US military even, was occupying inside of Iraq. Now while I was in 410 Cav, I was actually the ammo NCO, so I was in charge of all the ammo, making sure the other line units got the ammo they needed, and I had to account for it and all that kind of stuff. But additionally to that, we did a lot of barrier missions where we would go outside of the gate, usually at night, and just set up barriers on the side of the roads to try to counter against the ability for snipers to be able to shoot at convoys, or be able to set up IEDs on the side of the road, or maybe even set up barriers for other FOBs or police stations for the Iraqis. So we did a lot of those missions, and those missions were always late at night, last all through the night, and then you come back in the morning, and most of the time you would get to, get a little bit of rest, but there was a lot of times as well that you didn't have a chance to. You had to still get other tasks done and get missions done, and you had to run off of very little sleep. That was probably definitely the rougher deployment of the two, because it was longer and there was just a lot more happening on that second deployment. After spending, it ended up being about 14 months probably in Iraq, we went back, and this was in 2009, and we returned back to Colorado, back at Fort Carson. So now I was finally at a point where it was safe to go ahead and get out of the Army, where I wasn't gonna put myself in a bad situation to really screw things up or whatever. I was at a good place to where I could go ahead and transition from the Army side to the civilian side. And a lot of people, would ask me, you did 10 years, you're halfway to the 20-year mark to be able to retire. I always look at it like this as an analogy. It's kind of like, walking from California to Colorado, and someone telling you you're halfway to New York. Why don't you keep on walking? Well, that was a really long walk from California to Colorado, and if I can just quit now, I'm gonna do it, I guess. Being in the Army was a good experience, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and it wasn't what I wanted to do for another 10 years. At that point, the military was really kind of deploying every other year. It was like 1 year in Iraq, 1 year back home, 1 year in Iraq, 1 year in Afghanistan, whatever the case might be, back and forth. And I didn't really want to do that with my life. It's slowed down a lot since then, and it's not quite as hectic as that, but I didn't know what it was going to be like at that point in time, and I was just ready for a change. So in 2010, I was finally able to get out of the Army and transition from the military lifestyle to the civilian lifestyle. I decided I liked it in Colorado, and so I stayed inside of Colorado Springs. I went to school for a little bit. I did use my GI Bill. I didn't want to use the post 9/11 one because it kind of just the way you could work the system with the assistants and everything like that. The GI Bill was just a little bit better, and then if I exhausted all my GI Bill, I could actually use another year of the post 9/11 incentive for doing college. So I did the GI Bill and got a associate's degree in television and radio. While I was working on that associate's degree, I ended up getting a job on Fort Carson to work with some training systems. I first started working at the place on Fort Carson, and we were doing vehicle simulations and dismount simulations. It was basically a video game that's modeled off of Arma 3 called VBS 2, and then later we moved to VBS 3. It was a lot of fun. You were basically playing video games with soldiers. And it was only recently, earlier this year, that they wanted to move some people around who have been doing different jobs for a very long time at this facility, and so I got moved around from doing that to now teaching JCR, which is, if any of you have been in the military or are currently in the military, you may know what JCR is, but it's what has replaced like FBCB2 or the BFT. It's like a fancy military tracker that you can see what's going on in the battlefield, where enemy spot reports are from individuals, where other allies are, where obstacles are, and all sorts of other things that you can do, including messaging and stuff, but I won't get all involved with that. So there you go, that's who I am, that's my military history in a nutshell. I mean, I didn't go super in detail with it, with a lot of, different things that happened, but I mean, that's the real basics of it, and hopefully you kind of enjoyed learning a little bit more about me, this weird, crazy guy who's just been, telling you stuff about the Army. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this little history of me, make sure to hit that like button if you wish. Since you're here, if you want, go ahead and check out some of these other videos I got going on down here. And if you're new here and you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content from yours truly, maybe think about hitting that subscribe button. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.